measure out all of my liquid ingredients. Fish sauce. All right, 100 grams of fish sauce. So fish sauce, the most important aspect of this, right? The whole sauce is built around that. You just want to use the brand that you like. We use 3 Crabs at the restaurant. It's good and affordable because we use so much of it. Other brands that are good are Sun fish sauce and Red Boat. You know, depending on the sauce, depending on like how strong the fish sauce component should be, that's how I'll decide which brand of fish sauce I'll use. So for a sauce like ours, like Kangtabas, which is like very spicy, very tart, I don't need to use the best brand available, but I'll use one that I like. So it's 3 Crabs. Vegetarian and vegan friends can use, this can be substituted. You can use soy sauce, Magi, fermented tofu. We do like a vegan version of Nước Mắm Chấm at Kangtabas where we use fermented tofu. We'll probably do that recipe some other time. Totally acceptable to not use fish sauce. There's like a deep tradition of eating vegan food amongst Buddhists. Multiple kinds of vinegar. Okay, so how does that look? Now let's do lime juice. So, got some limes. Smell pretty good. Okay. Juicer. And I'm just going to juice directly into this on the scale. So we need 100 grams of that. Cool. For our recipe, we do 3 types of acidity. We do lime juice, distilled vinegar, and rice vinegar. The most common types of acidity you'll find in Nước Mắm Chấm is lime juice and distilled vinegar. Rice vinegar is a little unusual. I like it because it has a little bit more, it helps round out kind of the bracing acidity of distilled vinegar, but it also gives you kind of like that subtle rice sweetness, which I like. And you'll see that in Kangtabas recipe, there'll be like multiple kinds of sweetness, multiple kinds of acidity, and that's because I think it just kind of like gives you a lot of layers in the flavors, but that's not necessary at all. It's us being kind of extra and overly complicated, as my mom has told me. A very, very good, very basic version would just be like, you know, fish sauce, lime juice, that's it. On that note, so like, you know, we're using multiple kinds of acidity, but there are some versions of acidity, or there's some substitutions for acidity that I've seen that we're not using. I've seen people use orange juice. I've seen people use citric acid, if you're being like really weird, and like if you want like a lot of acidity and not a lot of dilution. Sometimes cooks will like cut segments of the lime into the sauce, and you'll see these like the cells of the lime in there, and that's like a really nice pop of acidity when you're eating the sauce. And honey. I'm gonna do 35 grams of honey. We'll do 10 grams of sugar, 1 gram of salt, which is like a pinch. So we have fish sauce, acidity. Next sort of component is sweetness. Most common is sugar, whatever sugar you have available. Kangtabas recipe uses sugar and honey, and then we get a tiny bit of sweetness from the rice vinegar. Again, we're using that because I like the sort of complexity that honey brings to it, and we use you know, organic cane sugar, which also brings a little more complexity to the sweetness. But whatever is available is good. Whatever you like is good. Other substitutes I've seen: palm sugar, rock sugar, agave, more like fusion-y places use maple syrup. A really cool way to get sweetness into it is coconut juice or coconut soda. I've seen that too. Definitely also seen like Sprite used. But again, you gotta make sure that when you're, whatever like sweetness you use or acidity you use, you're gonna account for that as you adjust your seasoning. So like something like maple syrup will have a little bit of acidity to it, or brown sugar will have a little bit of acidity to it. So you want to make sure you're just accounting for that when you consider what acid you're putting into your recipe. Lots of ways to substitute. Our recipe has salt as well, just a very little, small amount of salt. Not required. I think that is because we use it as like the only seasoning on our cabbage salad. So mostly we use our Nước Mắm Chấm as a dressing for our cabbage salad, which we don't season in the bowl at all. All the seasonings from the sauce. So again, it depends on what you're using it for. If you want to up the saltiness of it, then you can add salt. And again, depending on the fish sauce that you like too. I think Three Crabs is not as salty as other brands. I think I can blend that. That's my liquid stuff. So then next we're gonna do our solids. It's ginger, garlic. All right, let's get the garlic going. Garlic, we want 8 grams, which is usually like 1 clove, which we will mince. Ginger, same amount. Okay, that's gonna go in the sauce there. Garlic, ginger, chili, right? So that's the aromatics. I'm gonna call it aromatics. Garlic is the most common, then chili. Ginger is a little bit less common. Our version has as much ginger as it does garlic, but again, none of those things are necessary. I'm gonna use a knife to sort of mince everything. How big or how small you want those things cut is again dependent on what you want the final product to be. The smaller you cut your aromatics, the sort of more pungent they're gonna be. If you slice your garlic really thin, it'll be more sort of sweet garlic flavor versus the mince. And then I'll sort of, in this, I cut it by hand, but if you're making a large batch or if you don't want to use a knife, which is totally fine too, I've seen you can do a stick blender, you can do a food processor, you can do a mortar and pestle, you can just pound the ginger, pound it and then put it in. So again, lots of different ways to do this. We wanted it minced because I want all this pungency for the cabbage salad. At the restaurant, when we're making large batches, we use a food processor for the garlic and the ginger. Peel it with a spoon. So that's like 8 grams of ginger looks like. But get a scale. Usually when you peel it, you'll lose some. That's fine. Same thing, I'm gonna mince this. You should peel your ginger. If you're, it's nice to peel it with a spoon because you don't have a lot of weight. It's like less waste than peeling with a peeler or a knife. If you're peeling like a ton of ginger and you don't want to do that, sometimes you don't want to do that, I would suggest getting organic ginger with like a thin skin and just really wash it. Usually thin skin ginger is like a younger ginger. And you'll kind of notice that by how small the ginger looks. Even when you're food processing ginger, you want to cut the ginger across the grain so you shorten those fibers. Otherwise, if you don't do that and you process it, you'll get these like long stringy fibers of ginger, which generally are not as appetizing. So usually we'll cut the ginger into coins across the grain first before we use a food processor on it. Bird's eyes and water. 5 grams of bird's eyes. Bird's eye. Bird's eye. Okay, so bird's eye chili is really important. We really like, so this goes under the aromatics component of the sauce. This is the most commonly used chili that you'll find in Nước Mắm Chấm. Really spicy chili that's small, so you don't have to use a lot of it, but it also has a really nice like kind of fruity component to it. In the restaurant, we use a food processor to process the ginger and garlic, but I asked that we cut the bird's eyes by hand into little rings because I like the presentation of it also, but like the bite of chili you get from just like a ring of chili, as opposed to like it being processed and minced and pounded throughout the sauce. I like the kind of like, that pop of spice and fruitiness that you get from the bird's eyes. Some places use a lot of jalapenos in it, totally fine. Sriracha, sambal, fucking crushed red pepper flakes if you have that. You want to make sure the thing that you're doing, if you're adding something for spiciness, that it doesn't add other things to it. So for instance, if you're using sriracha tends to be really sweet. It'll up the sweetness of your sauce. If you're using sambal, there's a lot of garlic and vinegar in that sauce, so it'll up the acidity and garlickiness of your sauce. So you just want to account for that. But there's no wrong, again, like I want to stress, there's no wrong way to make this sauce. Just make what you like, and make what makes sense for the dish that you're serving it with. It's going to be like 2 small ones or 1.5 big ones. And actually, we usually use gloves for this. Jess, did you find gloves? Okay. Yeah. And then, so yeah, we'll just chop these into small-ish rings. And then this stuff, I'm gonna try to handle this as little as possible with my hands. Okay. Less common aromatic garnishes you'll see in a Nước Mắm Chấm will be like jicama pickles, carrot pickles, pickled baby leeks are really cool. And then a really cool version of the sauce, which one day we'll do at the restaurant, is like you get like a soft-boiled or hard-boiled egg and you mash it up into the sauce. And that's like it's like a cool dipping sauce for like these like little fried cakes that are really good. Oh, pickled papaya, young mango, lots of ways to garnish this. Yeah, that's like the a lot of times when you see Vietnamese cooks like add their own flair or signature to this dish, that's where they'll do it. And in general, in terms of regionality, and like that's like speaking super broadly, but like the further in the north, they prefer like a more sparse Nước Mắm with less garnishes and stuff like that. But that's like being very broad. And then as you go further south, it gets more ornate and elaborate. That's everything in the sauce. We just got to dilute it. 20 grams of water. Last thing that's really important is the dilution of it. So you want to add water depending on what you're using it for. So we have a little bit of water in our recipe because it's just too strong, and I use the word tight, like all the flavors are sort of tightly bound together. A little bit of dilution helps open up the flavors a little bit more. So specifically for our cabbage salad, we just dilute it by a very little bit. But then we'll use this same sauce for our bún chả, which is like the cold vermicelli noodle dish, right? And so we serve it with the pork patties inside of it, and we'll dilute the sauce with chicken stock. But you can dilute it with water, you can dilute it with dashi. Again, it depends on what you're using it for. And generally, if you're like dipping something and just using a little bit of the sauce, you want the sauce to be super strong. If you're pouring a lot of the sauce over something, over rice, over noodles, you want to dilute that sauce a little bit more. That's it. And then we're just going to stir to make sure everything is dissolved. Get rid of this scale. So yeah, you want to make sure you stir this to dissolve all the sugar, make sure the honey is totally mixed in. If you have a bigger amount, you can use like a stick blender before you put the solids in, or when you're doing it like this. It's going to take longer than that, but I'm going to leave it there. So usually I check to see the bottom if there's any sugar, which that's like kind of what we're looking at. That's it. Those are like the main components, right? So our version, more ingredients than you need, more complicated than it needs to be. Also more tart. That's just because like I like a very tart version of this sauce. Many of the Vietnamese people that I cook for think my sauce is too tart. I think most of the versions that I eat are too sweet. But again, it's dependent on what you like. And it's like the most versatile sauce, one of the most versatile sauces you could find. And if we're being so foundational to Vietnamese food, it's cool to think about how ubiquitous, but how customizable this sauce is. And it speaks to something that we try to like reach for a lot at Kang Bot, is like something, the idea of something that is specific and yet highly customizable. That's why like pho is served with an herb plate. A lot of dishes are served with herb plates so people can customize it. That's why this like sauce that's so foundational to the cuisine is also super customizable, right? People argue about, if anyone tells you their sauce is the version of the sauce, they're being sincere, but they're wrong. Yeah, because there's no one true version of this sauce. There's a very basic version of the sauce, a very like plain version, and there's more ornate versions, but I would not venture to argue that there's like one best version. We're not showing you the best version, we're showing you Kang Bot's version.